Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Small History Podcast. Today is going to be a bit of a twist on my 21 Days in Japan series. Rather than carrying on with it chronologically like I have in many of the episodes up to this point, today is going to be focused on 4 of the days of my trip, which 2 of which were these next 2 days, the Saturday and Sunday weekend of my trip, followed by the next week, Saturday, and the Saturday after that, in which I traveled to a couple of Japan's Keiba. That is the term for horse racing in Japan. Now, there is a lot to cover when talking specifically about the horse as an animal and its role in society. If you have not already taken a look, I highly recommend picking up a copy of The Horse, A Galloping History of Humanity by Timothy Winegard. He's a Canadian author, so even better reason to buy it. But this book covers essentially everything you need to know about the horse, its role in the evolution of humanity, and one can argue, as Timothy Winegard has in his book, that it is probably the most important creature for human evolution, ranging from its origins in North America, how it spread to Asia, and then during the Ice Age became extinct in North America but continued to survive in Asia, became a part of humans living in the Eurasian steppe, and then you get into the ties with Genghis Khan, the Mongolians, and then you have it spreading throughout the world as first and initially and still to this day as a source of food, like many other livestock, but then later for transportation, not only of people but also of goods, and then in other ways of improving industry, being tied towards farm equipment in order to make plowing fields easier, in modes of transportation with carriages, and of course in times of war as an important component of bringing supplies, as well as from the era of the Mongolians all the way up until probably the American Civil War, Russo-Japanese War, World War One, where you start to see its role diminished by the age of machines. The other book I recommend taking a look at, if you want something that's a little more North American centric, and Norton Greene's Harnessing Power in Industrial America. It's a really good book that talks about from essentially the colonization period, when you start having towns built up in the United States and Canada, and how the horses evolve and the cities around them really evolve around horses as an important component. So Japan is kind of in that spectrum of it. It's not as direct the focus in these 2 books. I'm sure if you know any Japanese sources better than I do, you can find works specifically focused on the Japanese case of the horse, but I'm going to talk about it kind of really briefly here. Looking at it through just a bit of a timeline. So, as we know, Japan's an island nation. It's not attached to the main continent of Asia, but we can use archaeology, science, technology to look back in history and understand sort of the origins of the horse coming to Japan. It's understood that from around 300 to 538 CE, so AD, the Kofun period, this is where we see the first instances of evidence of horses coming from Asia to Japan, likely through Korea, from the Eurasian steppes, and there's some uncertainties as to what specific type of horse it is, but it's most likely a type of Mongolian steppe horse, maybe a Preslavsky's horse type. And the reason we know this is, if you remember my last episode, I talked a little bit about the Yayoi period, the early periods of Japan, and how we use evidence through archaeological digs, the little figures of humans. Well, by the time you get to the Kofun period, we start to see now carvings, but also sculptures of horse figures in addition to people. And these are often found in these kofun keyhole tombs that are uh, part of the period. And you can typically find those in northern Kyushu and in northwestern Honshu, which are the two kind of parts of Japan that are more closely connected to the rest of Asia through Korea. So, so we're looking at around 300 to 600. So approximately 1500 years ago, where we start to see horses being introduced into Japan. Then you start to hear accounts of domesticated horses by the Kojiki period, so around 700 CE. And then as you get further into it, by the Nara period, you start to see them really incorporated, first as part of Shinma in Shinto and Buddhist ceremonies. You have them as sacred divine mounts for the kami, the spirits. And as you have in this Nara period, as Japan starts to import more and more culture from China, this of course includes the animals, which includes the horse as an important part of the lunar calendar. As some of you may know, this year, 2026, is part of the year of the horse, the year of the fire horse in the zodiac. So it dates back, and you start to see in this time period that it becomes tied as an important and essential component of Japanese culture through Shinto and Buddhism. Now, I'm going to skip through all the samurai period, but it is important knowing that from the Nara period, as you get through to the Ashikaga Bakufu, the Warring States period, the Tokugawa shogunate, horses are always present, and you can see that in a lot of the artwork. You see it as part of archery on horseback, similar to the Mongolians, but also as part of samurai, as part of privilege in that caste. You have the right by your level of power and authority to be able to ride horses to get to where you need to go. Whereas if you're in some of the lower castes, even if you own a horse, you're not necessarily entitled to ride it, and you could get in a lot of trouble. So, and this is where you see a lot of the difference in power, and as it evolves into the fall of the Meiji Restoration, you start to see the role of the horse transform. It becomes, along with other reasons, in terms of the military, of course, technology, the machine gun is making cavalry charges impossible. But you start to see horses move away from that role of direct military use and moving into more roles of caravans and supply and things like that. Now, if we're talking about Keiba, about horse racing specifically, we can look towards the spring of 1862, where in the treaty port of Yokohama, which is kind of in the southwestern part of Tokyo, this is where you start to see the first introduction of European settlers, and they begin to introduce what we would consider to be kind of the conventional horse racing format. You have some sort of set perimeter that institutes a course, and you have people riding it from a set start line over a set distance to a set finish line in a competition of who's got the fastest horse, who can get there first. And there's other examples, I think, where if you look specifically in Japan, you can see that. But this is kind of where you start to see it in this organized format, and you start to see the elements of European thoroughbred culture start to spread into Japan, and you see the adaptation of thoroughbred horses specifically bred to be ridden by a single rider for the purposes of racing. And then as it evolves through time, you now start to see governing bodies trying to regulate it. It's instead of it being sort of backroom deals and sort of underground gambling, and how it ends up getting legalized is by 1954. you have the establishment of the central governing body, the Japan Racing Association, Nippon Chuo Keiba Kai. So if you look at the kanji that I have at the bottom here, Nihon, Nippon, the first two, and then you have Chuo Central Keiba, which is the horse. And if you look at the second last character, that's the kanji for horse, and you can tell because it kind of has four legs on the bottom like a horse, and then Kai as association or company or organization. So so Nihon Chuo Keiba Kai, the Japan Racing Association, formed to regulate this thoroughbred racing. In addition, there are other forms of it. So of course, the JRA is focused on thoroughbred racing. You also have steeplechase or jump racing as well, which is regulated in part by the JRA. They have steeplechase racing, and then you also have what's known as Bane racing, and it's translates roughly to draft horse racing, and this is where you have your big heavy like farming Clydesdale style horses. These breeds are purpose built to race, where they carry these big sleds with huge amounts of weight on them, and rather than the jockey riding on the back of the horse, they ride on this sled and carry a longer whip that they use to signal to the horse to go. And rather than running on a straight track or having to jump over hurdles like in steeplechase, there will be like a big giant sloped hill. If you've ever played the old Nintendo video game Excite Bike, the ramps kind of look like that. It's a big vertical ramp with a flat elevated part and then a downward ramp. And the challenge is then it becomes a battle of not only of speed but also of power and stamina. Where if you ever watch it, the horses aren't going in kind of a consistent pace and then charging at the end. They're really saving up for these big single spurts of energy trying to get these big heavy sleds over the mountain. In addition to the JRA, you also have the National Association of Racing, the NAR, and whereas the JRA is kind of a central governing body that does everything, they monitor the horses, they control all the gambling odds, they run the facilities that the racing is hosted on each week. The NAR is a little bit more deregulated isn't the right word, but maybe decentralized. It's kind of more similar to what we have in North America, where you have certain governing bodies, typically by province or by prefecture. The NAR kind of is sort of like the AGCO in Ontario, the Alcohol Gaming Commission. They set all the rules for how racing is to be conducted in accordance with the federal rules for it, and in our case, North American regulations on it. And then it's up to the facilities themselves, the local prefectures, the smaller courses. They're the ones that then set all the rest of the regulations. For example, Kazamatsu, a small race track that's not part of the JRA, they would be responsible for scheduling the races, the prize funding, set the odds. All of that is done aside from the government agency. The NAR kind of just sets the rules. Whereas with the JRA is in firm control of that. They conduct the facilities, they monitor all the horses for training, they set the prize amounts, they set the gambling odds and adjust it as bets come in. All of that is regulated, and it's really important in this case in Japan. And the reason why it's such a big deal there compared to other parts of the world, in North America it's become really diluted now, the sports betting market, and we see that if you look at how many sports betting apps there are out now, where instantaneously you can bet on a football game or a hockey game that's about to start any minute now, and you can bet on everything from the classic kind of who will win, what the line is, if one team's heavily favored, well, are they going to win by 3 or more points or less than 3 kind of thing, to now where it's gotten so crazy where you can bet on every individual play. Is the ball carrier, is the team with the ball going to get 5 yards or more, or less than 5 yards on the next play. And even now, it's even crazier now with stuff like Poly Market, where you can put money on predicting whether or not the stock market's going to go up or down by the end of the day. Like, Japan doesn't have any of that. There is no there. It's way more strictly regulated, and because of which horse racing, as it became popular after being introduced in the 1860s, it has become one of the only really regulated forms of gambling, and it's monitored by the Department of, I think it's Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries. They it is heavily regulated, and because of it, there's all these strict rules and regulations monitoring to guarantee or as best ensure they can integrity and fairness in competition. So to talk about where I went here in this first day, I'll bring it up in later episodes when I get to talking about Kyoto and Osaka specifically. But as you can see on this map, we have showing from where I was in Akihabara here how and Fuchu, which is the main Tokyo race course. This was where I went to on this weekend. There's also another track, Nakayama, to the east. It's actually really close to the airport in Nakayama, a little bit more south. But as you can see in my case, I obviously was not going to walk. It was about a 6-hour walk if I tried to do that from where I was in Akihabara. Instead, I took the subway for the first time for any real distance, and it was actually a 2-line subway. So first you go on this yellow line here out to Shinjuku, and then I had to take a connecting line from Shinjuku out to Fuchu. So as you can see, it was probably around a little under an hour, about roughly 50 minutes to get over there. And that led me to the Tokyo racetrack. There's a nice sign there engraved in stone of the JRA race course, which leads just before you get to the walking ring outside of the track. To talk a little bit more about the JRA, so to really emphasize how heavily regulated the JRA is, there are 2 racing facilities. There are training facilities. There's one in Miho, which, as you can see here, is in the northeast. You have Narita, the airport region here, and then I think a little down here is Nakayama, if I remember correctly. So you have a training center here, and then there's another one called the Ritto Training Center, which is closer to Kyoto in kind of the more western part of Honshu. These 2 facilities make up the training for all the horses that compete in the JRA. It comes to, I think, around 2,000 horses. And as you can see in this next image here, it's an extensive network. By regulation, all horses that compete in the JRA must spend a certain amount of their time here, even though often they come from farms typically in Hokkaido, the northern province. They'll be brought down here and they'll train at this facility in Miho, or the other one at Ritto. And as you can see, it is a big operation. I believe there is close to 1,000 full-time staff working at each of these facilities, between everything from your hot walkers and feeders, your trainers, your medical staff. There's tons of veterinarians who work on the horses, administrators, officials, everything you can think of, stewards. Everything is fit in these facilities. You can see in the training tracks here to the right, they have a dozen different types of tracks to choose from. They have all types of various surfaces. They have grass surfaces and turf. They have dirt. They have wood chip course. They have elevated courses where they can focus on going uphill or downhill if a horse is struggling with that. They have kind of like a recreational kind of trail course that they can walk through for a forest for something like a cool down or as an alternative exercise. They have like saunas and swimming pools where they'll swim through water as means of dealing with joint treatments. They of course have all the stables, and they also, as I mentioned, they have veterinarian facilities, and these are quite frankly state of the art. Like they're some of the most sophisticated facilities in the world, and they get some of the best treatment and equine care anywhere on the planet. The second standing MRI machine in Japan when it was first introduced was not meant for humans. It was installed here at the Miho Training Center for horses. That's how serious it was taken, and it is a big business. As I previously mentioned, we're because it's one of the few regulated uh, forms of betting in Japan. There's some ways of doing slots through pachinko, but that's a little different. But in terms of regulated sporting, this is the top event that people bet their money on from day to day. So it's seen as an important part of legitimacy that the emphasis is placed on the horses, on having everything regulated, being monitored, being cared for. When they go out for exercises, training runs, they have a viewing area just like they do at the tracks on race day. They install chips into the sashes of the horses so they can do timing and scoring and evaluate everything about the horse that you can think of. And of course, there's all the facilities for the staff as well. There's supermarkets and sort of recreational areas outside of horses, groom welfare halls, and places where they can dine in and things like that. So there's all of this, and then what happens is typically they will race at 2 or 3 of their 10 tracks. They'll usually race there for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and then they will rotate through a different track, and they won't race at that track for several weeks, maybe a month or two, and this way that they can travel and expose all different parts of the country to horse racing. And it allows some level of balance. So the horses, not all of them have to go out at any one time, depending on what level of races of competition at. Some tracks will have like a big high stake grade race, and others will have sort of lower funded events relative to the others, and that way there's a little bit of exposure everywhere, and not every track is going to get chewed up every single week. Compared to Canada, it's really different here in Ontario because Woodbine has, I think, the longest meet in North America. It starts in early April, I believe, and it goes all the way till December. So it can take a huge toll on the course, especially with the fact that Japan races a lot more on grass, on turf, than they do in North America. So looking around the Tokyo track, there is obviously a lot of history and tradition and heritage in a lot of it. There are a lot of statues that are up to famous horses. There's a statue of Tokyo Minoru. That's not the one I have pictured there. I think that one is just dedicated to like parent horse, mother and child. But as you see here, this is the size of the viewing gallery here. So I don't have a good photo of Woodbine, and we're in my neck of woods for comparison, but you can see it's a massive structure. This is only about half of the, maybe a little bit more than half of the stretch, but you have this whole observation deck there. If you look at the far end where the glass is, that is restructure of the original viewing gallery. So originally it was that, and it was your more kind of simplified standard grandstand, but as it expanded over time, they built this extension to it, and then they refurbished the original viewing area that's now enclosed. And there's a whole mix of everything you could ask for. Upstairs there's all your fancy suites. You can see the press box up there for where the announcers would call the races from, and you have everything ranging from your outdoor seats. These ones out front would be less than $5 to rent for the day, and there's all your fancy upper viewing galleries where I'm sure you can buy fancy food and stuff outside from the regular concession food court. To my knowledge, at the Tokyo race course specifically, it sits around 200,000 people. So you're not talking small numbers. And this was on, I think the biggest race was only a grade 2 stakes race, so it was one of the less big events. When it hosts grade 1 events like the Japan Cup or the Japanese Derby, it is full, and it is insane to see images of how cramped it is, because this whole standing viewing area is full. There's it's really different because of the in-person attendance being so much greater. You have uh, a lot more kind of just standard open viewing areas. You don't have as much cluttered with um, things like patio viewing decks and like VIP rail experiences. It's nice because for a general admission ticket, um, at most of the smaller tracks, it's free even, and then Tokyo's was $1 to get in. So, and you have all this lower viewing area accessible to anyone. And as you can see here, like you can get right up close to the action. One thing to note is that I believe at every JRA track, the turf track is on the outside and the dirt tracks are all on the inside. Woodbine is kind of unique in Canada, in North America, in that it's one of the only ones with that also has the turf on the outside. Almost all North American tracks, with the exception of that one, will have the dirt track on the outside. The other thing worth noting is that there are no real tapeta, all-weather surfaces in Japan. All the dirt track is natural dirt, and sometimes at some of the NAR tracks, the smaller ones, you might have a more kind of sandy soil than you do what we would think of as pure dirt here, like you would see at the Kentucky Derby or at Saratoga or Belmont or whatever. But here it's grass is the preferred surface, similar to what they have in Europe. The other thing that you'll notice is that there are no straight running courses like you sometimes see in Europe, or ones that kind of go into just kind of a single turn and a big L shape. There are weird oblong shapes, but the majority of the tracks are round, ovular in some aspect, with these huge television monitoring boards. But you will see that some tracks will race counterclockwise, left turning, like you see here at Tokyo. Others, like Kyoto and Hanshin, will run clockwise, and they'll actually run sort of the opposite direction of what we would think of in North America. Here is an example of one of the walking rings. So where I was in the previous photo is in the front where the grandstands are. If you were to go behind the grandstands, sort of turn around, walk outside, this brings you to the walking area or the paddock area. Um, it's really different in that a lot of tracks in North America now, the paddocks are kind of like a mini stable almost. You kind of have a little box where the horse is in, and then sometimes only on the bigger racing days will they use the outdoor walking ring. In Japan, the walking ring, this is it for all the races, and you'll have all the horses brought out one by one. They'll walk around in these circles, and as you can see up on the board there, you'll have all the betting odds listed. So there's everything from your win, place, show bets, your exactas, trifectas, trios. The other thing that's really different is that the fields are significantly larger. It's except with the exception of like a maiden debut race where all of the horses have never raced before, and this is collectively their first race. You will normally see fields of 10 or more, and even with the debut races, they'll usually be fields of at least 8. The stakes races usually have 18 horses regularly, so they are really large fields. The challenge of that, of course, is that it makes it harder to really get a gauge of which horses are the best horses, the favorites versus the long shots that you can get value in. But the other nice thing to trade off of that is that even when a horse is heavily favored, you can still get them at a fairly decent price. For example, this coming weekend is the Takarazuka Kinen, which is one of the biggest races in Japan. The favorite Quadra Nord, last I looked on the betting board, is getting odds of about 3 to 1. You get the numbers are also a little bit weird because the yen, because the payouts are in yen. You can see in this blue line here in the middle, you can see the payouts. Like the favorite here is getting odds of 1.2, so that would be 6 to 5 in North America. But 1.2 yen to 1 yen, you're not putting a single yen down. That's a penny. You're at a minimum base bet, you're probably putting down at least 100 yen, which is $1. So really, your payout is 120 yen, or $1.20. So but because of the larger fields, there's even the second favorite now in this particular instance is paying out at 6 to 1, and the third favorite is paying out at 11 to 1. So you have less of these circumstances where the top three horses are all paying within odds of 3 to 1, and there isn't much value for your money. Here's an example of a different walking ring. This is at Kyoto racecourse, and this is right before the first race, and yeah, you can see how different it is without all the people around. As you can see, all the similar regulations like you have here. They have security posted in the green suits and hats. You have open viewing area, but there's all the rules about warning: no flash photography, don't make loud noises, don't reach out and try to touch the horses, everything like that is safety. But you can see a lot of priority and a lot of money is spent on the looks, and you can see here in the background the level of money that's come in to make these facilities look really gorgeous and state of the art. What's also really different here, you'll have typically on the first or second floor, there'll be dedicated food court areas where there'll be 5 or 6 different types of restaurants. You'll have some of your yakisoba or udon type restaurants. Usually there'll be one kind of Americanized fast food. So there's one head of KFC, another head of Burger King. So you have those kind of restaurants as well. And then there's more conventional kind of Japanese stadium food. You can get karaage or yakitori on a stick. You can get takoyaki and of course a pint of beer. What's also nice on the stadium level too is that while there's a lot of viewing areas right on the rail, especially in the stretch, when you get to the corners, you have often grass areas where you can bring your own supplies in and you can picnic. One of the big differences I found was that there wasn't any metal detectors or strict searching when you went through security. You can bring your own food and drinks, alcohol as well. It's legal to drink alcohol outside in Japan. So you can bring your own drinks and just hang out. I saw people with their family essentially picnicking as they were out there, which is really fun to see. Here's another view. This is at Kyoto race course, so just a different view. You can see here that again you have the outer turf track and the inner dirt course, the same kind of rail viewing areas, and you can see onto the left side, you can see workers out in between races, and even as they open the gate and they take off, you'll see workers come out right away, prioritizing fixing any divots and spots in the grass where they try to fix it as best they can within each race. As I mentioned before, they'll typically run around 10 to 12 races, and then they'll do that for usually 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then they'll move to another track, which gives the track some time to heal. And of course there's maintenance staff that will look after it, but it's a really interesting way to sort of diversify the sport and be able to expose it to different parts of the country. Going back to tradition, legacy, you have a lot of monuments to famous racehorses. On the left here, you have the monument, the memorial to Rice Shower, really famous horse who has a bit of a tragic story to him. When he raced in Japan's Triple Crown, he beat Mihono Bourbon in the final of the 3 Triple Crown races in here at Kyoto, much to the displeasure of fans at the time. And then he later went on to win another race here, the Spring Tenno Show, to upset another favorite, Mejiro McQueen. And but because of those two upsets, became sort of the knight of Kyoto racecourse, and was unfortunately broke his leg in a race here at Kyoto, and was memorialized here. So you have a monument to him here, where a lot of people come and pay their respects in Lake Carrots. Here you have another monument to Contrail, who was the last Triple Crown winner. The Kikuka Show, the last of the big Triple Crown races, is raced here, and so this is a monument to him there that was established. And you can see the walking ring that I photographed earlier that I showed. That's it in the background. And then see, here's a good demonstration of the map of the race course. So you'll have your viewing areas up front here. You can see how the racetrack is sort of an oblong shape. If they run the long course, you can see it sort of widens as you go through the clubhouse turns and you go into the far turns. You've got two different track widths on both surfaces. It leaves some flexibility. Nakayama is really weird like that because they do the steeplechase racing, so they have some that sort of cut underneath and through between the surfaces. Here you also have kind of an outer park area. In Kyoto, you have a museum over on the west. Sorry, it would be the east side because it faces south, so it's the opposite. But here it's the west side. You have maps of all the washrooms. You have the walking ring here. There it is there. So, and you also have outdoor pavilions. There were some food trucks where I was there as well. So you have all that kind of stuff. Another big thing that you see there is you have a big merchandise booths here. The big one is called the Turfy Shop, which is sort of the main stores in the JRA, and you have all these different merchandises. You have these gigantic model horse plushies that are out in the two in the middle were, I believe, at Kyoto. The one on the right was at Osaka. The one on the left, I believe, was also at Kyoto, but I may be mistaken. But you can see there another big part of culture is just sort of being fans of the horses. You can get these little miniature plushies of many of the horses. Some of the popular ones that are currently racing, ones like Croix du Nord, but you can also get a lot of famous ones through history. Some of the ones I have, the four I've got, are Nice Nature, King Halo, Tiamat Pro, and Love's Only You. So if you're interested in looking at history, a couple of those are some of my favorites. You can buy everything else. There's keychains, there's books, there's t-shirts, there's hats, there's kind of all your standard sort of doohickeys, stickers, all collectors books that covers sort of the history of the tracks, all that sort of thing. So the other thing I want to talk about is sort of how horse racing is demonstrated in popular culture. That's the thing I think I'm going to leave off with and kind of close off of, because as we've seen, it has become a lot more popular in Japan, and I think we also see a bit of a surge in North America as well. And a lot of it has been popularized through Japan's ability and soft power through anime and manga, especially to bring it to the wider world, and it has drawn some more attention, a younger demographic that was maybe not as obsessed with the sports betting that and sort of gambling culture that some of the older demographic is more familiar with. We see the example I have here is Makibao, which is the horse, cartoony horse guy here on the left. There. So you have the cartoony horse guy on the left, Makibao, a cartoon in the mid 1990s. But then the big one that's really taken storm over the last couple of years, especially since the game came out in a global launch, is the series Umamusume. Japan has a knack for this thing called moe anthropomorphism. This could be a topic of its own for sure, but what Japan's really good at is taking elements of history, um, things like horses, things like World War II battleships, and turning them into anime girls. And an example, which is that, is in the Umamusume series. It especially took off when the feature anime Cinderella Grey came out. This is the one to the right, which features a really famous racehorse in the 1980s, Oguri Cap. The anime is based off of his career, and really the way his story took wind in Japan and revived horse racing in kind of a dark, dull period there in the 1980s and made it popular again. And things like Umamusume have kind of done that to a younger demographic, people more my age, 30 and below. But that's not necessarily a thing that's just exclusive to Japan. That it's resolving everything. Japan has its own challenges, as like North American horse racing is as well. One of the things that's been a challenge in Japan is trying to get more women interested, and specifically without the pressure of going on a date with their husband or being pressured by other male figures, a father or a coworker or something to pressure them into it or telling them that they know better. How Japan has gone around this is they've introduced this program called Umajo. Umajo, Uma being horse, and Jo coming from Kanojo, meaning woman, female. So it's saying it roughly translates to the women of horses, the women of horse racing, and it's designed as a program where they have at various race courses, like for example here, kind of in the background, you have a cafe on the second floor that is a women exclusive dining cafe, and there's other activities that are more targeted towards females to get them interested and to hang out with other women who are interested in horse racing and talking about it in kind of their own sphere with people more like them. And I noticed that myself, for example, going to Woodbine. You can see a lot of families going where there's maybe one person in particular, the group, who's more interested or more knowledgeable than the others. And it's that challenge of how do you get other groups involved. The JRA has been pretty clear that with their stance, that they have not actually ever directly partnered with the Umamusume, and it's likely they never will. And it's for different reasons compared to, say, North America. In North America, it's maybe still a bit stigmatic, or just people being sort of unfamiliar with this passion that younger fans might have with anime. For Japan, it's very different because culturally, I don't think they see that it as a need to draw this demographic through something like Umamusume. And in a way, it already kind of softly partners with itself. How they do it differently in Japan is you have other kinds of collaborations. So, for example, you have this anime series called Hypnosis Mike, which is I don't know it that well, but I did watch one or two episodes just to kind of get a feel for it. It's it's like these guys going on rap battles with microphones. Instead of guns, as a sort of a weird sort of fight against evil thing, and but it's targeted towards female viewership. So when I was at Tokyo that weekend, again, as a partnership with Umajo, so targeted towards a female demographic, you could travel to these certain spots around the course. You could learn, okay, your betting terminals are here, your smoking areas are here, you have a nice viewing gallery up here, your food courts here, but you could also collect stamps and collect stickers and tokens of all the characters from the anime. So there's these kind of collaborations that are on to encourage more people to get out and to explore their racing tracks. Tokyo also houses the Japan Horse Racing Hall of Fame. I will show more photos of that the next time I bring up horse racing when I talk about Kyoto. But there's also elements of it there. A lot of the famous horse racers in Japan have are enshrined in the Hall of Fame there. You're not allowed to take photos of there, but all the most influential horses in Japan's history, the leading sires, all of that is present in the Hall of Fame, which is really cool to see. But as a way that it's kind of worked, I guess, backwards, is that you have people who have been influenced by things like Umamusume or other elements of culture. And you see that in names of horses in North America as well. But the example I look at here in when I went to Hanshin in Osaka, this horse's name is named Obey Your Master, and that is the name of one of the primary antagonists in that Cinderella Grey anime. So there's some elements there where you can see it kind of work as a two-way street. It impacts horse racing, and horse racing impacts it, and it is starting to take some influence in North America. A wonderful gentleman by the name of Nathan Klein wrote his thesis on talking about Umamusume and its impacts of horse racing in North America, and how now with the global expansion, it's brought a new demographic that previously wouldn't probably consider horse racing to now be more interested in it, and it's just a way in to become interested in it and wanting to understand more. It's not necessarily like a perfect solution. It's not it doesn't address all the problems, and neither is it fair to romanticize Japan's model as the perfect model, but it does bring a new demographic in, and it's a thing that sports leagues, I think, all across the world, whether you're looking at horse racing or Canadian football or NASCAR or hockey or soccer or whatever, Formula One, you're trying to find ways to make things interesting for that 30 and under demographic. And this is just one example of a way to do it. I mentioned Umajo previously. There's a good article here that you can look up. I'll have links to all of these articles in the description of the video here. Another example, America's Best Racing, one of the top North American horse racing journals. Julie Stewart wrote an article about it as well, and you can see how it also then, what I think is different with this demographic compared to some of the others, you see where a lot of people are prioritizing what's known as aftercare, or looking after the horses throughout their life. Sometimes I think where the dark side of the sport is in the current sports betting culture is that a lot of times when the horse's career is done, they sort of get forgotten about. And of course, we have seen tragic incidents where horses that previously were maybe like stakes winning horses are they end up passing away running as an 8 or 9 year old in a $15,000 claiming race, when they probably shouldn't have even been racing there to begin with. But you see where this demographic is really prioritizing aftercare. A cool story was that $600,000 was raised for the stables and the farm that a horse Meisho Doto now resides at in Hokkaido. There's also a foundation that was started after another famous racehorse, Nice Nature, retired, and millions of dollars has been raised for horse aftercare thanks to him. So you have these other ways where people are now becoming interested in the horse industry, and I think where what you can really capitalize on that in a business sense is maybe it's less so focused on the sports betting where people are betting tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars a year on the gambling aspects, but more focus can be maybe made on investments towards care to horses and really supporting horses directly. And I think there have been some stories out where a couple of fans have just gone out and bought race horses, and now that's really hard to get new blood in that way, but it is kind of what I think the industry could look to as a solution. And but of course that's just me spitting ideas around as ways to find solutions to problems. But this is just a way in which we can look at as one possible avenue to getting more fans interested in it. What I can say from my experience, though, is that it was really eye-opening. It really contrasts how the industry is treated there versus here. You can see that reflected in the money side of things, where the handle, I think, in the U.S. and North America is a little under $50 billion. It's well over $100 billion. American in Japan. And as you can see, the facilities are top rate. I think you see a lot of influences in how Japan's facilities are structured and how the new Belmont Park is looking. So there's some ideas for inspiration taken there, and really it's interesting to see where it's gonna go from here because um, as a game, an anime, it might only go so far as to get fans hooked for a year or two, but a lot of series have shown that if you can hook someone young early enough, they'll be hooked for life for a long time. They'll be more inclined to think about it in the future. So I don't think we should be necessarily knocking it in North America. It's just an idea and a way of getting more people interested. And I think if you do that, you get more people interested in how the industry works. You can get more of the right people who are dedicated to building and growing the industry for the better of everyone. And you can try to kind of move away from some of the crooks or the sort of negative aspects that's associated with the sport. So that's what I wanted to talk about on this episode and on this trip. In the next episodes, I'll be talking about going over to Kyoto and looking at some of the shrines there. I am really excited to talk about Fushimi Inari. That was one of my favorite aspects of my entire trip. So you can be sure to look forward to that in the future. But you'll see a whole list of links in the description of this if you want to learn more, and some of the source material that I used, including Nathan's thesis, which I highly encourage someone to read, you to look at. As always, if you have any questions, if there's anything that I didn't cover specifically enough that you want to take a look at, by all means, post a comment, a question. You can ask me directly on social media, and I'll be happy to answer it as best I can. But that does it for today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.